Work it, make it, do it, make sense.
So I'm going to talk about security for the masses. So this is my first completely non-technical talk, which is a first for me. It's only got one code example. So this is going to be a new one for me, so I'm kind of stoked about it. Anyway, my name is Siren, and I am the head of security for a medical company in Sweden. So I flew all the way out here just to hang out with you fine people. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning, so I've been drinking coffee basically all day. So it's been a long day. I have a Twitter, which apparently everyone is supposed to know. Like, Twitter is something that's important that I barely never use, but it's there in case you care deeply about my Twitter. I also run a very small user group in Sweden, so if you happen to be in Sweden, come to my user group and you can hang out. We have free pizza and free beer, and we talk about security a lot. So that is my one plug for my user group that, you know, is in a different country. Yay! I have worked with security for 8 or 9 years now, something like that. So I've been doing this for a long time. I have a shit ton of certificates that prove the fact that I can take a test and pass the test. So they don't really say much about me. But I have both the CISSP and the offensive security, so I have both the technical and the policy ones. And if anybody cares deeply about them, we can go and review my CV after the talk. But frankly, they don't say anything about me besides the fact that I can pass a test. I love sushi, and I truly and deeply love my job. So if I seem really, really stoked, it's because I really, really, really care about security. So this is my talk. By a show of hands, and I do a lot of crowd participation, who here works with security? You have to raise your hand. 2 people, 2.5. 2 1/3. Okay. I'll give you 2 1/3. And I think that kind of highlights the problem, because who here has heard that it's important to work with security? So pretty much everyone, besides the 2 in the back. No. Fantastic. You live in a rock, like in a cave, under a rock.
Yeah, it's a different type of security. So I'm not sure, I'm just here to see what you are going to talk about, and maybe we can have a talk afterwards.
Sure. Okay, so everyone knows it's important, yet nobody seems to be doing it, which is something that fascinates me, because you'd think that if it's so important that people would, you know, their boss would tell them to do it, and they would tell them to do something constructive, they would be given time to go for a course, they would be given a certificate, they would do something constructive. Yet I talked to a lot of conferences, I made a lot of other companies, and I can count on one hand the number of companies that have a constructive, actually good security program to take a junior person and actually make them a security person. Yet if you look on their website, they're going to have some sort of security touting security is super important to us. But when it actually comes to the nuts and bolts of actually getting it done, the field is empty. And so generally there is a top-down approach when it comes to security. The company's first response is to hire someone that has my particular title, which is the head of security, a CISO, a CSO, something like that that's very fancy. And then they put this person on their website with a picture with them smiling like this. And then it says their title, and then it has a long list of their certifications, and that is their entire security program. It is one person. And that person is generally not a developer, yet they are producing code. That person is generally a policy person. Anybody run into this person? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting to have an entire security program for a development company with one person that doesn't produce any code, yet they are their entire security department. It's fascinating. Again, I don't have the answer to that, but that is the way it is. The general lack of knowledge, I think we've demonstrated in this room by the people that don't really work with security, which is fine. And this talk is specifically for you. So I'm glad that you're here. I would say another problem is the larger security community, because a lot of security people are, and I can say this as a security person, dicks. It's true, it's true. A lot of us are arrogant dicks. Who has seen the DEF CON Black Hat talks, where it's some guy live coding an exploit in a pre-configured environment that he has found the super exploit, and somewhere in this talk, this person makes a statement along the lines of, no one could be this stupid until I found blah, blah, blah. Everyone has heard this talk. Everyone has seen this talk. Who would want to go talk to that person and be like, I don't know what I'm doing? I definitely wouldn't. And a lot of this, what is presented by the security community as a whole is that person. If you're coming into the security community, it is like running into a concrete barrier. I have very, very rarely seen job openings for junior security person with no experience, but we will teach you. So if you look at the job ads that are out there, it's 7, 8, 9, 10 years of experience needed. And then you turn the page in the newspaper and it's screaming lack of security personnel. And you're like, all right, I will get my 7, 8 years, 9, 10 years somewhere else. So it's a huge problem. So security community, not particularly welcoming. Once you start working in security, the burnout rate is unbelievable. So when you work in security, who's heard the story of Sisyphus? Guy who pushes a rock up a hill, and then the rock rolls down, and next day, rock up the hill, rock goes down the... And if you look at the types of people that work in security, they're not really prepared for that because, and this was myself included, you think that once you find a bug, the bug will be fixed and things will get better. And it's a common problem, but we'll get back to that. So here's the classic security approach. And if you look on the right there, that triangle, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, that is the sum total of security theory. It is the most important slide in this entire deck. That particular portion on the right, that triangle right there, that is all security theory. All security problems will be solved using this particular... I'm completely serious. You're laughing. I'm completely serious. No one believes me. It's true. It's completely true. All security problems can be looked at using 3 different factors, and it's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If I'm sending information from point A to point B, how sensitive, how confidential is the information that I am sending? Confidentiality. Integrity. How important is it that the information I am sending is the information that arrives? So if I'm sending a picture of a cat, and at the other end they receive a picture of a dog, that's either a problem or it's not. And finally, how important is it that I can actually use the service that I'm supposed to be using? And this is true for absolutely every single problem, and you can look at it from every problem is this. So if it's not important that the information is correct, for example, you don't really care about you're using UDP as opposed to TCP, for example, then integrity is probably not going to be the security mechanisms that you're looking at. If the information is publicly available and everybody can see it, then confidentiality is probably not your main concern. But if it's super important that that service is up and running all of the time, then you should probably focus your security efforts on availability. So I was getting back to that with the hiring of the CISO. If you read security certificates and if you take security classes, they're all going to come back to security is impossible if you don't have management support. You have to have the buy-in from your CEO, your CIO, your CFO, your C-level, whoever they happen to be. If they're not backing you up, security is basically impossible to do. And it's true, to a point. However, if you don't have the buy-in from the people actually building the code and the testers, I would argue that it's equally as impossible because the CEO is never going to walk down to the developer and just be like, I am going to do this with you. At least I've never met that particular CEO. Maybe they exist. I've just never experienced them. It's also incredibly policy heavy. So who here remembers their IT security policy? Yep, that's no hands up. Who here has signed an IT security policy? I rest my case. So that is security work that's obviously extremely effective because no one remembers it. And it's unfortunately, if you look at a lot of the head of security people, the people that have my particular position, what they believe to be security work is writing a giant document that is then signed and then immediately forgotten. And then expecting that to be effective. And it's not. It's absolutely not. But that is what a lot of security people do. And that is because it is a top-down approach, and you're hiring someone that isn't an engineer. They're not technical. They can't read code. And so they go to a CISSP, which is a great certificate, and they learn how to write policy. But the certificate doesn't tell them that there's more, that they need to be more in contact with their R&D. So if you look at this person, they're generally not in contact with their developers. They're not in contact with their testers. They're not sitting and reading code, and they're not writing specialized requirements. Because if they were, you would remember your IT security policy because it would be written in a language that you can actually understand, and it would actually be technically enforceable. And generally, it's not. And finally, security is, unfortunately, at present, and this is something I'm hoping to change, incredibly specialized. So I tell people I work in security, and they immediately assume that, this is some sort of special skill, and I'm here to tell you it's not. But it's very rare to find a developer that says honestly that I'm mostly a developer, but I have some security stuff that I do every now and then, which is a problem. And it's odd because you assign all security work to a security boss or security developers, and then you make that a silo, and you lock that skill set into one particular person, which never works because they can quit. They can leave, they can do a bad job, they can do any number of things that just simply are bad. So, you remember my story of Sisyphus? This is my amazing graphic that I didn't think would work, that I stole from Google. It's true, I did. So, common security problems, and here's why security fails. If you have security in a silo, it dies, because it's not going to be spread throughout the entire organization. Does anyone know the most common security threat or the biggest security weakness? See, I'm going to call on you because you're sitting in the front row. People, yay! It's absolutely right. And if you have all of your security locked into a particular silo, it's not going to be spread throughout the organization, which means your receptionist is going to let the hacker right in the door, and support is going to tell whoever is calling on the phone all about the back end. But you're going to have a security person working in a silo that's unaware of those particular risks. There's a failure of understanding. So who here could tell me, and I'm not going to call on anyone because this is actually a hard question, why two-factor authentication is used? Everyone knows it's a good thing to have two-factor authentication. Most people use it. But very, very few people understand the problem that two-factor authentication is actually trying to solve. Go ahead.
So my understanding is that means if your password is, so the whole point of two-factor authentication is that it's something you know, which is your password.
Yes.
And something you have, which
yes.
is the number that comes off your token.
Yes.
And the thing is, if one of those gets compromised, they still can't get into your account.
Very good. And do you know how many people have been able to answer that question?
I'm assuming quite a lot.
It's a shockingly low number. I think you are one of 3. And I pose this question because everyone knows what two-factor authentication is. Most people use it, and most people tell me it's brute force. They're trying to solve the brute force problem, which is true, but you can solve brute force in a lot of different ways. Two-factor authentication actually strengthens your authorization and authentication process because you're absolutely right. Authentication is built on 3 particular pillars. It's something you have, or no, I'm doing it in the wrong order. It's something you know, something you have, and something you are. And in very weird circumstances, you can have a 4th one, and it's somewhere you are, like a geographical location. But that one generally is not used. But everyone knows that it's something that you should use, but most people don't know why. Same thing with Cloudflare. Same thing with validation. Same thing with obfuscating certain URLs. Same thing with a lot of validation checks. The list goes on and on and on, but most people are unaware of why those things are important, which means it's really uninspiring to do them. There is a failure of vision in the security community, and this one saddens me the most. Because if you don't know where you're driving the bus, it is really difficult to get there. So if you have a company, and this ties back to the leadership idea, the leadership and the company has to decide what type of company are we? What type of security do we offer? And how are we going to get there? And the company could decide that we don't care about security. They could do that. And are they going to publish that to their customers and their users? Yeah, maybe. Or they could do what Volvo did and make it their selling point. So I know nothing about cars. Like, I take my car to the mechanic and I'm just like, do something. But when I bought my car, I know that Volvo is super, super safe, and that's why I bought my car. So I drive a tank from my perspective. And so I paid a little more for a car that is safer. Now, I know nothing about cars, so that could be complete crap. I don't know. But I bought the car specifically because of Volvo's message of security. So no one correct me and tell me that I'm driving some sort of horror, because that'll make me sad. So why does security fail? I would argue that it is two different factors. And chiefly, it is that people have a misunderstanding of what security actually is. So, personal story time. When I started working in security a long time ago, I came in and I got my first security engineering job after I was a pen tester. And I made money when I was going to school as a pen tester, doing bug bounties, finding bugs on the internet. So that's how I fed myself. And I got my first big person job at a company doing their security. And I came in and I thought I was hot shit. I was amazing because I'd had several years of people paying me money for doing basically nothing. It's true. Pen testing is relatively easy. And so I started at the company and I was like, I'm going to solve all of these problems. This is going to be great. And I started just pumping out bugs because I was the first security person they had. And I was 3, 4, 5 bugs a week. And I would put them in and they would be immediately placed in backlog. And I was like, all right, I'll find a nastier bug. And so I did. And it was immediately put in backlog. And then I found an even worse bug, and I just bug after bug after bug. And I mean, it ended with me having 30, 40 bugs in backlog. And these were not nasty, or these were not, the picture change. These were big, 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 dangerous bugs, and they all sat and languished in backlog. And what I'd failed to appreciate was that security is not necessarily all locked into code. I had failed to appreciate the fact that if my boss didn't understand what I was doing, they were going to sit in backlog until the day I died. It's true. And when I left that particular company, they are still in backlog, to my knowledge. So yeah. Security fails for that reason. It's not all in code. And the second reason is the user. Now, I have the Bose headphones, the ones that were spying on the users. Does everyone hear the story? They were sending data to a third party. They were selling it on. They were possibly spying on calls. Everyone's heard this story? Most of us has heard this story. They were spying on us. So Bose made an app that you connect to your headphones. They're wireless. And through the app, you get firmware updates to your headphones. I got the app, have the headphones, using it. And I'm sitting on the train one morning, and I'm listening to, my terrible music, because I have terrible taste in music. And I'm reading the news, because that's what I do every morning, and I see that they are spying on me. My headphones are spying on me. And I'm like, oh God, oh God. And so I started reading the newspaper article, and it turns out that the fact that they were sending this data was clearly listed in their terms and conditions, which I had not read. And I had no way to turn this data stream to the third party off. So somewhere out there, Glitter McSparkle Pants, which was my app name for someone knows that Glitter McSparkle Pants has terrible taste in music and avoids answering the phone like it's on fire. And so I'm reading this, and more importantly, I'm reading people's reactions to it. So what Bose did was not a security problem at all. They just simply had chosen not to give people an opt-out. And they had failed to appreciate the fact that people would probably think it was inappropriate for them to sell on their data. And that is not technically, from most people's understanding of what security is, a security risk. There was no exploiting code. There was no leaking of accounts. There was no passwords that flew out into the distance. They were simply taking data that they had gathered in from me and selling it on to a third party in terms and conditions that I had agreed to. I just hadn't bothered to read them. And so it turned into this huge story, and Bose took this information and released a new app that you can now opt out of, which I promptly did. So people seem to think that security is always exploiting code. It's always, a hacker getting in. But this was a security problem for Bose. They had to immediately, push out a new app version where you could opt out. And it was a big story. It wouldn't surprise me if they lost some customers based on this. But if I ask people, was that a security risk from a pen tester, I'd probably get 50-50 yes, no. But it is a security problem. So if we make the mistake of assuming that all security is in tech, then we're going to miss security risks like that one. Which brings me to the dreaded user. So this is what Bose failed to appreciate. They'd failed to appreciate the people who were using their particular product. They'd failed to appreciate that the people who were using this particular product would be offended by a third party realizing that they have terrible taste in music and avoid answering the phone. And had they taken those two considerations into account when they were making their app, maybe they would have made other choices. Maybe not. I mean, maybe they decided that they don't care about security. I don't work there, so I don't know. But the mistake they'd made was a failure of understanding of their marketplace. And they'd made the mistake of failing to understand that people's privacy concerns were way up there. They should have ranked up the confidentiality leg on the triangle that I showed you a few slides back that everyone has forgotten already, because everyone does. So when you're building something, you have to look at security from the perspective of the people using it and the concerns that those people might have. In this case, the privacy of their calls and the privacy of their music they're listening to. That doesn't mean that you have to find a working exploit, but you have to have those security concerns taken into mind when you're actually building this thing. And this is probably the most important question. How do you then rise to meet that challenge? In Bose's case, it is entirely possible that they knew that people would freak out if they found out. I don't know, I don't work there. So it is entirely possible that they had this discussion and they had decided that that was an acceptable risk, that it cost the company more to have an opt-out function and have people not send in their data that they could then send on than it would be to have this discovered. And that's entirely possible. So when I say how are we rising to meet that challenge, that doesn't mean that you have to rise to the challenge to actually perform security or do security or have security at all. It's true, you don't. But you have to make a decision as a company. And in Bose's case, maybe they made the wrong decision. And again, I don't work there, so I simply don't know. The reality of security is that not all of us are penetration testers. I happen to be one. But most people, when I say, are you going to start working in security, the answer I get back is, I'm not a penetration tester, or I'm just a developer, or I don't write code. And I think this is so sad. I cannot write code. I can't. I can read code. I can code review. But put a gun to my head and I will produce the ugliest code you have ever seen in your entire life. It is truly mind-bogglingly bad. But I can code review. I've never been able to code, and it has not stopped me from working in security, and I would say in a marginally successful way. I also have no desire to learn to code. I've tried, and it's just not my thing. So there's a misunderstanding that penetration testers are the only job that exists within security, which is a problem because it's 2% of security work. My strongest, I don't even know the word, but my strongest defenders are the people that I need the most in my organization are security developers. And not even security developers, I need developers that actually write secure code. I don't need penetration testers. I don't need, security gurus. I don't need DEF CON. I don't need Black Hat. I need a security developer who knows how to validate their code. I need a security developer that, oh no, you're smirking, it's true. It's totally true. I need a developer that knows that echoing back the password is a bad idea. I need, no, like everyone is laughing, but these are all examples that I have seen. I need a developer that knows that sending personal data over HTTP is a terrible idea. That putting the password in clear text in a cookie is a terrible idea. That having the password in a drop-down menu is a terrible idea. That having no password is a terrible idea. I mean, all of these are instances of bugs that I have seen in production, in the wild, weeks ago. I mean, they are still out there. These are not the bugs of, yesteryear. These are recent bugs. And they're built by a developer that's hopefully not sitting in this room, and if they are, I'm so terribly sorry. But they're obviously still being produced. And a penetration tester, yes, that person would have found that particular bug, but I would argue that having a developer that knows that that's a terrible idea is a stronger case and a more important case than hiring a penetration tester to, frankly, kick a dead horse. Most of us are horribly understaffed. And if you have a top-down approach, you're taught to think big picture. You're going to be in the C-level, and you're going to think big picture, and you're going to make a big plan, and it's going to be very big, and it's going to go over 6, 8, 9, 12 months, and it's going to be huge, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to revitalize your entire organization, and it's going to be staffed by half a person. And that is never going to work. There's a screaming need for security people, like screaming. If you write security somewhere in the margin on your resume, I guarantee your recruiter will call you. Promise. I'm pretty sure you don't even have to spell it correctly at this point. It's true. It's true. It is a screaming, desperate market need for security people. And yet, for whatever reason, developers aren't taking it upon themselves. If we are given a budget, and that is an if, not a when, it's generally not large enough to buy the shiny new blinky box that all of the salespeople at DEF CON, Black Hat, ISC Squared conferences will tell us that will solve all of our magical problems. All of the magical problems. Our budget is generally small, if we get one at all. It does not cover the giant, holistic, huge plan that I have for my half a person that works every other Wednesday. So, what do? How can I solve my problem? Because that doesn't mean that I'm somehow excused. I can't just be like, all right, no budget, no people, no security. No one wants to hear that. I would be fired immediately. So I still have to solve the problem. And so I can make two choices at this point. I can either try and build something with nothing, or I can leave. Or I can make the third terrible choice of just screaming into the wind, trying to get a budget, and trying to hire my 26 people that I've decided I need for my big picture. Those are my choices. Final problem, security is horribly misunderstood. Most of the time, I can't tell people what I do because they assume I have some sort of magical power that I can hack into their whatever it is. And it's always fast, and it's always speedy, and it's always amazing, because when people look at security, they're looking at people at DEF CON where everything has been filmed in a pre-configured environment, and it goes super, super fast. What that person isn't telling you is that that particular bug took them 6 months. Like someday I'm going to make a film of me hacking, and it will be me in my pajamas, sitting roughly in this position, like imagine me just like laying in a chair, drinking copious amounts of coffee for 6 months. And after 6 months, I will produce an IP address. And 6 months later, I will have gotten a teeny tiny little bit further into whatever environment you're trying to keep me out of. And the thing that I have on my side is time. I can sit there and wail against your firewall until the end of time, frankly. But your job is to keep me out, and to keep me out of every single hole in your company ever. I only have to find the one thing you missed. And I can sit there forever. And I can script it because I can script, and I'll just script everything to, keep hammering away. And sooner or later, I will get in. And then I'll present it at DEF CON as if I just did this in 5 minutes, and it's super cool. And it's simply not true. Here are the special skills needed. Yep, it's a long, arduous list. It's very long. It's a functioning brain, skill number 1. And I would say bravery. This is the most important skill. You have to be brave enough to say, I have no idea. I say it on a regular basis. Security is a massive field. Massive. And there are a million things about security that I don't know. And I say, I have no idea on a fairly regular basis. And if you're starting in security, you're going to say it even more often than I do. And so you have to be brave enough to say that you don't know. And you have to be brave enough to be able to say, I don't know, more than once. And you have to be brave enough to ask the question. And if you're not brave enough to do those 3 things, then you're not going to succeed within security, because it is a massive field. So here's the special skills. I think that everyone in this room has the particular skill set that is needed. If you can't code, doesn't matter. Can't test, doesn't matter. If you can ask a question, you're good to go. That's it. That's all you need to be able to do. You need to ask a question and be brave enough to ask it. That's it. That's all. There is a Stack Overflow for security. It's Security Stack Overflow, just as well populated as Stack Overflow. I hang out there a lot. Don't send me your keys. I see that a lot. Don't do it. And you can ask the questions there. You can write to the OWASP forums. You can write to any forum. You can talk to your neighbor, talk to a fellow developer, Google. But ask the question. I get to hear a lot when I give talks of this particular nature that I can't do security because the customer doesn't ask for it. And this will always be true. The customer is never going to be knocking down your door being like, I demand stronger HTTPS, because the customer has no idea what that is. The customer is never going to ask how you encrypt your database. The customer is never going to ask about your password management or your account management or your access control. It is never going to happen, ever. However, I refer to Apple, who did this probably best of all. Apple, when they built the computer, they built the iPhone, they built the iPod, they built the watch I'm wearing, they did not have customers knocking down the door to get those things. Apple drove that particular innovation. It is technology that drives innovation. It is not the customer. It is advertising that drives the need for something. It is not the customer. Volvo's done this spectacularly with my super safe tank car. I have no idea if it's true or not, but that's how it was advertised and that's how I bought it. So if you're waiting for somebody to call you on the phone and be like, I want to secure something, I mean, 1 of 100 people will do it. I'll probably be that one person. But most people simply don't care, or they're not knowledgeable to actually ask the question. And it's simply the way it is. And this is kind of my own highly personal opinion, and you can take it or leave it, but I believe that as developers and as engineers, we have an ethical responsibility to actually deliver a secure product. I think that if you're building something and you know that it is insecure, or if you know that there's some problem, that I think we have an ethical responsibility as security people, as human beings, to deliver a secure product. And I hear when I say that people are like, well, I'm only a developer. And I would argue that that's enough. If you are brave enough to ask the question, if you're brave enough to say something, then that can be enough to start a conversation. I mean, I have been working in security for many years, and again, there are lots of things I don't know, and I have been sitting in meetings with a developer who is like, well, what about this? And it'll be a security risk that just totally whoosh, blows my mind. I hadn't even considered it. But the fact that that person was brave enough to actually ask the question at all means that we handled an actual risk that I probably should have thought of, but didn't. The person had no idea how to attack it. The person had no idea how to actually write the code to attack it, how it worked, anything like that. But just simply asking the question started a discussion where we realized it was actually a problem that we could handle before it hit production. And that was just simply someone being brave. So this is my highly personal opinion. But if you're building something, I think you have an ethical responsibility to deliver it in a safe manner. If you're doing something that you think is morally questionable, that adds a risk to a customer, that adds a risk to a patient, that adds a risk to someone using it, I think that everyone has the ethical responsibility to say something. And they could be overruled by the C-level, they could be overruled by their boss. That's a given. But at least say something so that person knows what they are overruling. I would argue that this is the way to start working with security. And since you're all here listening to me, that you can't say I'm wrong, because this is my talk. Everyone knows what risks their own product has. And people start, when I say that, people go, well, I don't work with security, and I say you don't have to. Because every developer can tell me, well, don't send that particular library, my database will break. Don't send that to my API, it'll break. Don't do that, it'll overload. If someone finds that, it'll be a problem. Everybody knows this. They just don't consider it an actual security risk. So take those things and write them down. It can be on a Post-it note, it can be on a wall, it can be on a, I don't know, whatever you happen to have at work. Just write it down so that you're aware of them. You don't have to do anything more, just write them down. And identify trust boundaries. Who in here knows what a trust boundary is? Ooh, no one. Not even you. You did so well just before. You did so well, I'd hope. Don't worry, we'll get to that. Don't worry, you'll learn. So you write down everything that you think could go wrong with your system. Buy some pizza, grab a beer, do whatever it is you want to do, and just have a think. Just think about it for a little bit. And then this is the most important one. Start small. So most people, they get a security book, and it's thick and it's boring. It's probably, some sort of tome. Or they go to a security conference, and they're inspired. And then they look it up, and it has lots of huge security systems that you could build in, and they're immediately overwhelmed with the security problems that they have and the security things that they should do, and oh God, where do I start? So start small. Pick something, anything. It can be one API. It can be one request. It can be one website. Just start with something. And please start with something small. This is the big security secret, and this is what everyone should start with. This is code. This is the only code I have in this talk, so I'm a little nervous about it. This is a validation string. Validate your code. Ta-da! You will solve 8 of 10 security problems. This is the big secret. Everyone thinks validation is boring as shit, myself included. But if you validate your input, I can't send nastiness to you. If you validate your output, you can't post nastiness that I've somehow gotten into your database back to me. This is it. This is security right there. Done. I have never met a developer who can't validate their own code. Never. It's never happened. Ever. Everyone can do this. Everyone is capable of doing this. This is security. That's it. Start with validating your inputs and your outputs. It's called defense in depth. It is the strongest security mechanism we have. Just validate what you send away from yourself, validate what you take into your system, and I swear to you, and I could beg you on bended knee, but I don't think you can see me behind the table, that this will solve 8 of 10 security problems. I promise. And you won't believe me, and that's totally fine. Google, and you'll see that I'm not lying. But this is it. This is the big secret. This is a trust boundary. So this looks super confusing. It's very flashy. It's very fancy. This is simply identifying what speaks to what over a trust boundary. And a trust boundary is when I speak to somebody that isn't me. So if I speak to the gentleman over here on my right, hi. We have a trust boundary between us. So if I'm validating the code, I'm like, I am sending the gentleman on my right a glass. And I know that it goes through a trust boundary because he is not me. We don't work at the same company. So when he sends the glass back, I'm going to give it a good gander to make sure he's actually sending me a glass. And then I'm also going to ask myself, how do I know it's the same dude? I mean, he could be a different dude. So now I have to check. Is it the same dude on the right? Yeah, same dude. Cool. Is it the same glass? Yeah, looks like the same glass. Okay, and now I can take it. So when you're developing something, you write up what talks to what. Do you talk to vendors? Do you talk to foreign APIs? Do you talk to foreign SDKs? Do you talk to foreign databases? Do you talk to foreign applications? Do you talk to whatever it is? And that is a trust boundary. And most likely, that is where you're going to find your security problems. Because you're going to make some assumption that the dude on the right is still the same dude, so I don't have to check. Or, my personal favorite, he's always been trustworthy before. Sorry, I'm sure you're lovely. But, he's always been trustworthy before, so I don't have to check. Or another personal favorite, he would never do that. Sorry, I'm picking on you now. Or he wouldn't care. So going back to the Bose headphones, I don't think anybody would have thought that people's playlists leaking would be a big deal. Netflix was hacked and people's film, what movies they were watching was leaked, and that was also a big deal. But if you'd ask them on the street, do you care if everybody knows that you watch Gilmore Girls on a regular basis? I don't, but, maybe. Shh. If that, it was leaked and everyone thought it was a huge deal. Bose, my terrible taste in music all over the place. But people make assumptions that no one would care about that until they do. So, trust boundaries. Validate your input. And you will get started in security. I promise. I swear. I know what I'm doing. I promise. This is probably the hardest one for new security people and developers in general. Not every fire needs to be put out. When you start in security, when you start looking at security problems in general, you're going to find a massive heap, huge, of security problems, security bugs. Remember my giant backlog? And what I'd failed to appreciate at the time was that not every fire needs to be put out. From a security perspective, it can be more important to know about the problem and decide that you don't care than to throw yourself over it, create an emergency patch, and panic. But when you're new, that can be a really, really difficult thing to appreciate. Some days, I've been doing this for a long time, even I struggle with it, so I have to take like a 10-minute brisk walk around the building. And then I come back and I'm like, all right, we don't care. And it's a hard one because you've found it, so obviously it's a burning problem, and you can't understand why everyone doesn't care. And that can be really, really, really difficult. The sky is rarely falling. You may think that this is the end of the world, but the media will say that this happens, and it's going to be a huge thing. But The media loves to write about security because it's sexy and it's new, and everyone loves, hackers because we're spooky. But the sky is rarely falling. And if it does, you're going to be fine, as long as you're prepared. Some things that you can kind of help keep the sky from falling and to give you a better understanding of the risk that you've just discovered are two different things. One is the CVSS database, and it gives you a ranking of how dangerous a vulnerability might be. It also has open vulnerabilities that you can look at. So this library of this, that, and the other thing is currently a critical. You can find the patch here, this, that, and the other thing. And then there's also OWASP Top 10. OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. It's a massive global project working with application security, believe it or not. And every single year, they kind of look at what current security vulnerabilities are most dangerous and most common and rank them from 1 to 10. And if a security problem that you find is on that particular list, then it's probably something you should address because it's common, it's well known, and it's known to cause damage. This list is also something that penetration testers use. It's also something that auditors use. So you can use it to say to your boss or your general or whoever it happens to be that it's on the OWASP Top 10 list. It's a given list, and they will be able to rank that according to the fact that it's an auditable list. It's something that's given. The most valuable thing you can do, and I've kind of harped on this during my talk, and I'm going to continue to harp on it, is asking the question, have we actually considered what will happen, rather than actually finding the exploitable code. So if you're building something, actually asking the question, what will happen if, so that we as an organization can prepare, so that your security team can do something, so that you and a developer can do something, is far more important than actually being able to find the bug itself. Being able to find the bug is great. And I'm not saying that, it's not an important skill, that it doesn't have worthwhile, but I would hazard a guess that 8 of 10 times it's far more valuable to be able to identify the risk ahead of time than the bug in production. Because if you identify it ahead of time, it won't get out to production to begin with. You'll be able to actually address the problem. So everyone remembers the triangle from my first slide that I said was super important? No one does. It's totally fine. I'm going to skip back to it. See? Because everyone lies and says they remember, and they don't. If you take nothing else away from this talk, there are 2 things. 1, be brave and actually ask the question. Everybody starts from somewhere. And in security, unfortunately, the community has a way to go to be more welcoming. But I promise if you're brave enough to answer the question, someone will help you. Second thing, this really is where to start with security. I promise. If you're struggling to figure out what to Google, go to the triangle and be like, all right, my API is sending information. I am sending a password, for example. It is super important that that password not leak to anybody else, so I have to think about confidentiality. Super important. It's also super important that that password is actually the password. Integrity, probably super important. So when I start Googling on Stack Overflow, I know that I should be Googling confidentiality problems with that particular API or that particular service or whatever it happens to be. Same thing with integrity. How am I hashing this particular password? Because I know that those 2 things are important. Availability is still important, but it's probably not as important as the first 2. Everybody following me? Good. All right. I don't know if DevOps does this because I'm new here, but if anyone has any questions, I will take some questions, because that was all I had. Be brave, people, please. Oh, one more thing. If you hang out at the OWASP forums, or if you hang out security forums at all, I'm Asbrakas. You can always write to me, because I do a lot of intro trainings for new people. I do a lot of newbie questions, and so you can always write to me, because I like helping new people. So I will be your way in, worst case scenario. All right, now I'll take some questions. If I have any questions at all. Maybe I don't.
I'll give you a question.
Oh, yay.
Do you have a mic?
You can just yell.
Yeah, they like the video recording.
Oh, sorry.
I can hear you, but they're a long way away from me.
Okay.
Over here. You want to go? Okay. I'll start while other people are thinking. Okay. So I'm a CTO. And
Hi.
so I have to deal with security, not
I'm so
as my
sorry.
primary hat, but I have to also help people think about security. One of the things we talk about is for encryption, but anything really, is how we store it, how we transfer it, and how we handle it. Is it just those three things, or am I missing something?
You've forgotten one particular thing. And this is a particular skill set of mine. It's called daisy chaining. If I get into your system, the first thing I'm going to go after is your log files. So when shit hits the fan, you're going to want to figure out what I just did. And if I can recreate the log files and back out of your system recreating the log files as I go, you're going to be in big trouble. So traceability, don't forget it. Because most hackers, and I know a fair few of them, go after the log files first. And if you haven't salted and hashed your log files, you're going to have a terrible time. Because worst case scenario, I'll find an exploit and then I will sell it to someone else and you'll never know I was there. And the next person will get in and they'll not know that they were there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So salt and hash your log files. Other questions?
Hi.
Hi.
Something I kind of struggle with is you mentioned the trust boundary. So I could take the view that everything in my data center is trusted.
Yes, you could.
And I could take the view that if I'm going from my app server to my database, that communication path doesn't need to be secure.
You absolutely could.
Would you have any comments on that? Is that a good thing to do?
Do you trust your people?
Good question.
Do you let anybody else into your building?
Good question.
Do you let anyone else onto your network?
I'm leading to the answer is I shouldn't really trust
You
them.
shouldn't, and here's the thing. I have a huge advantage when it comes to security work, and it's the fact that I'm a girl. And this is the one area in tech that I have an advantage. Everywhere else sucks. But there are no female hackers. I will stand in front of your database and I'll have 2 cups of coffee and it'll be my first day and I'll be really sad. And you will let me in.
Okay, thank you.
So...
Yeah, hi, that was a great talk. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'd like to know if you have any comments on the kind of pattern which I've seen a fair bit, which is where you'll implement this application without necessarily having security in mind so much, and then someone will come along and say, right, make this secure. You know,
that happens all the time.
So they'll have bought some, some library that you're supposed to integrate that somehow makes it secure, or they've just got a story that says, as an information security analyst, I want it to be secure.
Yes.
Do you have any comments on dealing with that kind of attitude?
Sorry. That happens a lot, unfortunately. And generally, the way security work is done is it's either 3 days after it was in production or 30 seconds before it's supposed to go to production. And those are the 2 options that suck. And when that happens, honestly, there's nothing you can do. The honest answer to that, IT security analyst, is where were you 3 months ago?
Okay.
Yep. It's an honest question, because if you don't design security from the beginning, taping it on to the back end and just being like, it's not going to work.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, do you have any opinion on the use of static vulnerability scanners for code? Because we brought one into our organisation, and at the moment what it's doing is there's loads of issues coming up with the applications, and then really not getting any time or much time or budgets for people to fix them. So do you have any? Are they of much use, or is it a case of just causing extra problems for yourself?
It depends. It depends totally on how you use them. So a static vulnerability scanner tends to vomit out like 3,000 vulnerabilities. 3, 4, 5,000. Huge. And then usually it'll have like, I'm going to say that your organization is semi-up to date. I'm just going to, cross my thumbs. Say it has maybe 10 criticals. Maybe. You don't have to say yes or no, but we'll just assume it has 10 criticals. And we're going to assume that your boss is like, I see that, and my response is la 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 la. And you're going to be like, okay, that's fine. And then you make a chart. And then you start charting how long those criticals are in the system. And then you can say, okay, we scan every week, and there was 10 criticals week 1, 10 criticals week 2, 10 criticals week 3, 10 criticals week 4, and sooner or later you're going to have a really long span of time, say 4 months. And then you have, most organizations have a KPI of some type, and all of a sudden you have proof that your organization has ignored 10 critical vulnerabilities for 4 months, say. And then you go to your boss or your boss's boss or whoever has the ability to actually help you, and you present that to that person. You say you're either okay with this or you're not. You have to make sure those 10 critical vulnerabilities are actually real, because false positives are real. And if they say, then, you know, we're fine, we're okay with 10 critical vulnerabilities in production, then I can't help you. But most people would not be when presented with the fact that it's lived there for a long time and no one is doing anything. But most of the problems with vulnerability scanners like that is that you have such a huge mountain of information that it doesn't become something that a non-technical or CTO or a CEO or a CFO can consume. But a small number of verified bugs that have been there for an extended period of time is a scary KPI, especially if you have shareholders or stakeholders or someone that the board is responsible to. That's going to look really bad. So I'm usually not for the scare them into action, but if you're really struggling, that can be kind of a last resort. Scare them into doing something. What?
Regulators will scare people.
Oh yeah, certainly. It's blinking at me that my time is up. So I guess thank you very much.